Greetings and welcome to our Good Friday service. Today, we've come together to spend some time reflecting on Jesus' journey from the Last Supper to his death. We shall do this with readings, both from the Bible and other sources, and with some gentle singing and plenty of silence. While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he broke it, gave it to them, and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them, and all of them drank from it. He said to them, "This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many." The One Bread by Jack Osborne. They were all together in an upper room having supper. They all ate a bit off the same loaf, and the symbolism struck them. We are a gang of chaps, separate individuals, but now we have something in common because we all contain the same bread. He said, "Do this in remembrance of me." So whenever they ate bread together, he would be there, in all their heads simultaneously, like parted lovers, both looking at the moon and holding close in their minds. He passed around a cup of wine, and all drank from it, one after the other. And the bread, the wine, and the cup were symbols of unity forever. Why don't you try it? Perhaps in Lent. It's not just bread and wine, you know. It's more. There's more to it than that. That's what he meant.
Trust in me and you will not thirst. Your ancestors ate manna in the desert, but this is the bread come down from heaven. Eat this bread, drink this cup, come to me and never be hungry. Eat this bread, drink this cup, trust in me and you will not thirst. Eat my flesh and drink my blood, and I will raise you up on the last day. Eat this bread, drink this cup, come to me and never be hungry. Eat this bread, drink this cup, trust in
Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet, not what I want, but what you want." A reading from Matthew for Everyone by Tom Wright. Jesus didn't want to drink the cup. He badly didn't want to. Jesus at this point was no hero figure marching boldly towards an oncoming fate. He was a man, as we might say, in meltdown mode. He had looked into the darkness and seen the grinning faces of all the demons in the world looking back at him. And he begged and begged his Father not to bring him to the point of going through with it. He prayed the prayer he had taught them to pray. Don't let us be brought into the time of testing, the time of deepest trial. And the answer was no. Actually, we can see the answer being given more subtly than that implies, as the first frantic and panicky prayer turns into the second, and then the third. To begin with, a straight request, "Let the cup pass me by," with the sad recognition that God has the right to say no, if that's the way it has to be. Then a prayer which echoes another phrase in the Lord's Prayer. If it has to be, "May your will be done." The disciples probably didn't realize that when Jesus gave them the Lord's Prayer, this much of it would be so directly relevant to him. He had to live what he taught. Indeed, the whole Sermon on the Mount seemed to be coming true in him as he himself faced the suffering and sorrow of which he had spoken, on his way to being struck on the cheek, to being cursed and responding with blessing. Here, for the second time in the gospel narrative, we see Jesus fighting in private the spiritual battle he needed to win it, if he was to stand in public and speak and live and die for God's kingdom. The shocking lesson for the disciples can of course be turned to excellent use if we learn in our own prayer to wait with them, to keep awake and watch for Jesus. And at any given moment, someone we know is facing darkness and horror, illness, death, bereavement, torture, catastrophe, loss. They ask us, perhaps silently, to stay with them, to watch and pray alongside them. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I don't know or understand what you're talking about." And he went out into the forecourt. Then the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. Then, after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to curse and he swore an oath, "I don't know this man you are talking about." At that moment, the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. The cockerel crowed. The cockerel crowed. He didn't whisper. He didn't announce the new day quietly. He shouted out at the top of his voice for all to hear, "It's a new day!" All Peter heard was, "You denied me. You denied me. 3 times you denied me." The cockerel crowed for all to hear. And as we today hear the story of that denial, we also hear a cockerel crowing every day in our broken lives. And thank God for Peter. By Tessa, Wilkinson. And they got to the place called Skull Hill. They crucified him. Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they're doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And they threw dice for them. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in 2, from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and removed his body. Nicodemus, who had at first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices and linen cloths, according to the burial custom of the Jews. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. And so, because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. There Was No Grave Grave Enough by Stuart Henderson. There was no grave grave enough to ground me, to mound me. I broke the balm, then slit the shroud, wound around me, that bound me. There was no death, dead enough to dull me, to cull me. I snapped the snake and waned his war, to lull me, to null me. There was no cross enough to nill me, to still me. I hung as gold that bled and bloomed, a rose that rose and prized the tomb, and away from Satan's willful doom. There was no cross, death, grave, or room to hold me.